All right, welcome to my final entry in this this journey into exploration into reading and writing. Basically, what we're going to do here is talk about how I'm going to modify my academic language lesson plan for English language learners. And before we get into that, how I'm going to make those changes, I wanted to talk about the article and some of the things that I believe are important within it. I think it's important to realize that the standard and ultimate goal for the learners, as cited within the article, Understanding Language, is that for all learners to become career and college ready for them, they need to be a literate person in the 21st century. Basically engaging with complex texts, using evidence and writing research, speaking and listening in order to work collaboratively, and presenting ideas, and developing that language to do all of that above effectively. This basically means be able to effectively read, write, listen, and speak fluently in language. This is an important factor to factor in when you're teaching ELLs, as depending on what age grade they're in their native language. This will help guide any instructional strategies needed to be employed to better suit your learners. This also means they need to be exposed to language in numerous settings, contexts, and subject matters to fully be submerged within the language's complexity. It also helps to incorporate any prior knowledge or experience of the students that are being taught in order to consider potential alternative access points to engage your students learning with. There also must be multiple opportunities for the ELLs to practice fluency. This would be including different avenues of exploring relevant content, an array of activities to engage in authentic learning practices. As stated in the article, ELLs may encounter challenges such as having to process intricate, complicated, and often obscure linguistics and cultural features accurately while trying to comprehend content while remaining distant from it in order to access the content's value and accuracy. This is where spending time with ELLs interweaving their native language alongside an activity can be beneficial, even by getting a better understanding about the ELLs' literacy background, interests, motivations. Provides teachers with clues of what supports might help students to compensate for the linguistics and textual challenges presented by different kinds of texts. Such as one idea I thought about is incorporating quinceañeras or soccer or pupusas, which are culturally important to a Latina or Latino student, and they might find it more interesting and meaningful if you're using these type of things that they're familiar with, and that they would be more inclined to write about and research and try and teach you possibly as a teacher about them using English. I think by simplifying a text is a technique to ensure that ELL students are fully comprehending it, or breaking down into smaller parts so it's easier to attain instead of trying to burden them with too much at once. Could be a method to slowly introduce a difficult text or topic. I believe that allowing them to use their home language or varieties of language during the writing process, employing technology as students use already, and drawing upon their background knowledge, practice, and experience can be useful. Even such as Spanglish, kind of a mix of English and Spanish together, I think is another example that I think for writing, if you can use interweave those together, would be an important way to blend kind of language learning. This also means ensuring that while writing instruction creates meaningful opportunities to communicate rather than mechanical exercises for text production. My lesson plan is centered around figurative and literal language, and was written specifically with a student classroom in mind, so it's already been kind of modified and created with accommodations intended for students to fully appreciate, comprehend, and grasp it as easily as possible. However, when I'm considering ELLs, I think a few changes that I would make to ensure that is accessible to all my students, whether they have IEPs or they are ELLs, would be I would provide different versions of a poem to analyze, or a Spanish version of that same poem. For example, if I was teaching some people who are predominantly Spanish speakers, I would find a poem that wasn't so dense in metaphors and complex with imagery. as the one I provide is pretty hard to interpret. I think this would ensure that figurative language was explicitly comprehensible because it would be more simplistic. I may put them out side by side with the L's native language and then the English one, so we can compare them side by side. So putting both of them out there, the same poem. I may also provide more visuals to go along with the smaller chunks of the poem to ensure that the connections were being apparent. So putting up a visual of a certain term or a certain sentence, so they could get a better understanding of that particular portion. So it would be a little bit easier to continue on with the lesson if they had that visual to help. I might ask students to write out their own poem instead in their own native language, and then I may translate that back into English, and then have them use these to identify where there is figurative and literal language being used. So that way, having them have an opportunity to write it out, and then we can go ahead and identify that. I would also have them trade possibly with their peers who are also speaking of that native language, so they can go and look at and underline, identify specific parts where each aspect is being used within their partner's poem. But also make sure that they have the definitions of both the terms we are focused on clearly available for them, both in their native language and in English. So just in case there wasn't some uncertainty about what they were looking for, I'd make sure they'd have understanding of that, and slowly take that away piece by piece, so they'd have to familiarize themselves with those terms in English. And this is just a few of the different ways that I would modify my lesson for ELLs. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you this week.